what Mark Bittman said and his sentiments and his conclusions, I want to amplify a little bit here because we're in the same boat. And my father died of lung cancer, and Faith's mother just died last year of lung cancer, and we've got a lot of things going on in our own lives, but fortunately we don't have the food problem. But thank you again for inviting us, and because Faith's not here, I'm going to have to once in a while glance down at this, so I hope you don't mind. But can we please bring the stage lights down? Because Faith's been my partner for a long time, and she's really busy on this brutal book deadline. She is actually, besides my wife, she's a writer, reporter, photo assistant, food stylist, and everything else. So although I haven't been married 4 times, I do have to mention her name a few times in order to be able to go home. So we're going to bring the lights down as low as possible, and then we're going to get started, please, in all good faith. For the past dozen years, we've been obsessed with food. We've been eating and drinking, photographing and interviewing, learning and discovering in more than 60 countries. We always eat what other local people eat, and we try everything that other local people are eating, like deep-fried starfish in Beijing. Gritty and quite nasty, I gave it actually no stars. But Faith did find the tropical fruit in Irian Jaya very interesting. This comes naturally for us, eating a regular diet wherever we are. But what we eat, our diet, the word, the concept, the simple list of what we eat every day has been kidnapped and tortured by nutritionists, by health food addicts, the weight loss industry, the food industry, agribusiness, big government, the pet food industry, you name it, and they've got a diet for you. Something simple, basic, and natural is now complex, elaborate, and increasingly unnatural. To better understand our diets, to put the planet's pantries in perspectives, we came up with a really simple idea: to use photographs, interviews, and statistics to show readers what the rest of the world really eats. We did this in more than 24 countries with 35 families, photographing them with what they eat in a typical week and listing the weights and total cost of their food. We called that book Hungry Planet. A typical family and the amount that they eat and spend in a typical week got lots of people thinking around the world. We saw that the planet's pantries are quickly becoming globalized and that the places people stock up at are becoming huge and homogenized. Supermarkets are becoming nearly ubiquitous, and they tend to look the same in nearly everywhere. It's the shoppers who look just a little bit different these days. We spend half of our time every year working all over the planet, and of course the first thing that we do when we go home is to restock our own larder. And it was in these gleaming Goliaths fed by agribusiness that we began to notice that something was really out of whack. It wasn't the size of the soft drink or candy aisles, the frozen food sections, or the sugary cereal shelves. What really alerted us to the kinks of our food chain was the size of our fellow shoppers. We were growing as a nation in unhealthy ways, but most people who saw themselves getting only incrementally bigger day after day were oblivious to the change. Coming back into this country as often as we did, we noticed change as it was happening, and it was pretty frightening. If Darwin had landed at Safeway or Burning Man instead of the Galapagos, he wouldn't have seen any blue-footed boobies, but plenty of big-bottom Bettys. He would have observed people loading up on meat, fatty snacks, sugary drinks, and highly processed foods with more ingredients than a chemistry project. This phenomena has a name. It's called nutrition transition. And when people have more income, they veer away from their very simple diets. They start eating more meat, more fat, and more sweet things. And it's really only human nature that they do that, because these foods in the short haul make you stronger and they taste good. But nowadays, monitoring the consumption of these foods is much more difficult. Once you get a taste for them, it's really hard to know when to stop. And for thousands of years, these foods were the most difficult to obtain, so genetically there's no built-in moderation. But everyone here, and many people who struggle to control their weights, probably already know this. The success of the last project got a lot of people thinking about the weekly grocery bill and what they could put on their families' dinner tables, and we felt really good about that. But we were thinking, what other information could we give individuals that would help them understand their own biology, chemistry, and physics? Quite simply, it's not what you eat, It's how much you eat and how much energy you burn between eating. So now I'd like to show you what we have been doing for the past 3 years to illustrate basic concepts along these lines. We went around the world a few times photographing and interviewing 101 individuals with what they eat in a typical day. The idea is to learn by comparing ourselves to others, and here's how we did it. We'd pick a country, we'd choose an occupation, we chase down a subject, we interview the person, we choose a location, we shoot the picture, we record the subject's age, height, and weight, then record the weights of every last morsel of food on a digital scale that we carried with us everywhere, organize the information and calculate the caloric value of every bit of food, have our staff check the numbers, then have nutritionists at UC Davis check everything one more time. Sometimes it was easy to find the subject, like Muna, the rickshaw driver here with his day's worth of food. He's in an alley behind his house with his wife and his kids looking on. Sometimes it was a lot harder to get into a place like this garment factory in Dhaka or this busy call center in Bangalore, India. Sometimes we had to shoot really quickly because the police stopped us, like here in Tokyo at rush hour with a bicycle messenger, or in Shanghai with a law student at dusk on Nanjing Road. And for a photographer, it's often better to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. But I'd like you to keep an eye on these kcal numbers up here. And as you probably know, the average for women is 2,000 and for men is 2,500. And you'll see a lot of anomalies in here, but there's explanations for all of this. And since we're shooting daily life and showing what these people do for a living and how much energy they really consume, when you see the book and you see the whole thing together, it makes a lot of sense. Some locations were extremely remote. This is a fisherman's floating house on the upper Amazon in Brazil. Other times, special visas were necessary, like here in Iran. We shot this illiterate baker in the desert city of Yazd. Safety was an issue at times, like with this iron worker in Chicago on the 50th floor. Or at other times, we just prayed we would find a willing subject, like Padre Ricardo in Rome's San Marcello. Or a widowed farmer in China's Sichuan province with her dog named Dudu. By the way, we did this in 30 countries and a dozen US states. But why were we exerting so much effort to show what other people around the world eat and to add up their calories? Well, I think it's because we're losing control of something very basic, and we're exporting our misguided overindulgence. If trends continue, researchers estimate that 86% of American adults will be overweight by 2030, with an obesity rate of 51%, and by 2048, all US adults could be at least mildly overweight. Here in the US, we spend more per capita on healthcare than any other country, but we're increasingly unhealthy. And why are we eating ourselves to death? We could blame it on advertising. McDonald's spends $800 million advertising its products each year, while the National Cancer Institute spends $1 million promoting fruits and vegetables. And yes, this is Conrad Tolby. He's had 2 heart attacks, but look what he still eats, and he still smokes. The truth is we eat too much, throw too much away, and seem to care mostly about the price and the quantity. We don't really care or know where our food comes from. Society has lost respect for food and farmers. Less than 2% of the population is involved in food production. We have as many prisoners now in this country as farmers, and that really seems criminal. We photograph farmers all over the world for the new book. This is Gordy Stein. He's a 3rd-generation corn and soybean farmer in the Midwest. And Joel Salatin, a sustainable farmer and author in Virginia. And this man, a hamburger helper. Actually, Kelvin Lester is a meat grinding supervisor in a southern Minnesota meat company. And I was really pleasantly surprised to get access to this factory because I saw it on the web, and they had just had a 188,000-pound recall because of E. coli contamination. So Kelvin showed us how beef carcass trimmings in 2,000-pound bins are mixed with all kinds of other scraps and reprocessed fat from cattle all over the US and the world. So there's no way to really tell how many animals go into this microbial melange sold as ground beef. After work, Kevin cooked for us at home, and when I told him I liked my burger medium rare, he warned us to always cook hamburgers until they're well done. There's just way too much risk of food poisoning, and much worse from fecal matter if you don't kill the bacteria with lots of heat. We had no hesitation about eating insects with families around the world for another book we did, but here at Kelvin's, even though I was still hungry, I stopped after just 1 fecal burger. Joel Salatin, you saw before, manages his Virginia farm the old-fashioned way, with animals and plants on the same farm. The manure of the animals fertilizes his crops, and all his fields are rotated. It takes more work, but he uses no fertilizer and gets higher prices for his produce. By contrast, the vast majority of the 90,000 beef cattle slaughtered every day in the US spend much of their much-shortened lives in huge factory farm feedlots. This one here is just south of here. It has 100,000 head. And when you have this many cattle in one place, defecating 25 pounds of manure each and every day, with no sewage system, many stand around in pools of manure. After 6 months eating hard-to-digest grains laced with antibiotics to prevent disease in these crowded pens, there's the electric cattle prod, then there's the stun bolt gun, and the next step is the undressing room. And the real trick is to get the manure-caked hides off the carcasses without contaminating the meat. Reprocessing fat is a big business in the USA. Here's some human examples. We explored weight loss by spending some time in the Catskills last summer with this incredibly smart, athletically gifted 15-year-old. She just happens to weigh 299 pounds. Mackenzie has attended this camp summer after summer, but she gains back all of her lost weight every school year. That was her 4th or 5th year there. In Tennessee, we documented Rick Bumgardner's attempt to lose 100 pounds by dieting so we could qualify for gastric banding. He admitted occasional cheating on a 1,600-calorie diet. But he dutifully began an exercise program, went swimming for the first time since he was a teenager, and he's lost 50 pounds in the last year. Weight isn't an issue here. This is 120 miles up over South America on the space station. And I want to thank NASA and Leland Melvin and all the other astronauts on the last shuttle mission who helped wrangle the floating food for this photo, which I guess was harder than getting a Republican to vote for health care. I wanted to take this photo myself, but NASA told me that I would have to lose 165 pounds to go on the mission, and since I only weigh 170, I didn't really consider it too seriously. But after 23 years of bulimia, after years and years of bulimia, 23-year-old Mario Booth is now pretty healthy, but she's getting less modeling work because her weight is more sensible. This is Millie Mitra, the ultimate recycler in Bangalore. She has a thirst for shimvambu, which is the practice of drinking your own urine, which she is doing here. She's done this for years, awakening at 3 a.m. to take advantage of her own jet stream. Her husband and daughters have tried it, but they didn't stick with it. Maybe it was asparagus one night. She did tell us, though, that you have to avoid certain foods in order to be able to do this. Michael Ray, a 6-foot, 110-pound researcher in Pennsylvania, on a Methuselah diet, is extremely motivated. He's trying to live to be 110 years old by never consuming more than 1,800 calories a day. Michael, maybe you know, co-authored Aubrey de Grey's latest book about reversing aging. But we had one of the most interesting dinners at his house in Philadelphia. The main course was filamentous fungus, which is a mycoprotein product originally discovered growing in a field in Buckinghamshire, England in the 1960s. How was it? Well, filamentous fungus tends to grow on you if you're not careful. So instead of after dinner mints, we snorted foot powder. But Dr. Scholl aside, we did eat it, and it was actually better than a fecal burger. On the other side of the scale, Miyabiyama, he's 4 feet wide and 400 pounds, and his day's worth of food looks small in comparison. Professional sumos cook and eat chanko nabe. This is a stew pot of vegetables and meat or fish at nearly every meal. It's eaten with copious amounts of rice and side dishes. And Miyabiyama now eats to maintain his weight rather than to gain it, unlike the younger, less gargantuan wrestlers in his stable who are eating a lot to pack on the pounds. Here are some really young, skinny ones at the end of a morning workout. It surprised us to learn that Ted Sikorsky, jobless and homeless in New York City for the past 6 years, has to watch his weight. This is Oscar Higares, a professional bullfighter in Madrid. He strictly controls his diet and exercise, although he does play with his food. Miguel Martinez, he's a shepherd in Spain. He's among the few pastoralists left in Europe. In northern Namibia, near the Angola border, we met Via Hanjera, a 23-year-old Himba pastoralist. with a simple yet abundant milk and grain diet. We visited in March during the rainy season when she and her fellow villagers had lots of grass to eat, and they were big and healthy. Also in March of that year, during a protracted drought in Kenya, this Maasai chief's second wife gets by on very few calories a day. It was easy but sad to weigh the little bit Nuku'Sorani eats in one day. The skinny cows gave her barely a few cups of milk, and she stretches it with some poor quality water from a water hole a half-mile from the village. 2 months later, Senteto, our Maasai friend in Nairobi, who helped us in his village, emailed us this photo and these words: "The chief has less than 50 cows and calves left from his large herd of more than 400, and that it is getting dire because the rains have not been adequate." As if the drought wasn't bad enough while we were there, here's one of Nuku'Sorani's pregnant cows that they had to slaughter on the spot because she was bloated and couldn't get up. After cutting open the cow's stomach, they discovered the cause, which was a 20-pound tangle of plastic bags the cow had eaten. So plastic bags are nearly omnipresent in every developing country's landscape. And how is this? Well, it's litter and wind. The Maasai told us that these undigestible plastics have a slightly salty taste that appeal to hungry grazing cows. And in 2005, the Kenyan government considered banning plastic bags, but the measure didn't get very far. Surprisingly, Bangladesh outlawed them. Why is that? Well, monsoon flooding is made much worse by storm drains that happen to get clogged by plastic bags. So, replacing the plastic bags are these mesh bags, which we found being sewn in a rural village by a microloan recipient in our home. Discarded mesh bags let water pass through them. In Yemen, discarded normal plastic bags are everywhere, mainly because they are used for bagging khat, the leafy drug that permeates Yemeni and much of East African society. Downwind of a market in the Hadramaut Valley, they end up decorating the desert. Khat is harvested from these trees, and much of Yemen's scarce water supply goes to irrigating this huge cash crop instead of vegetables and fruit. It's chewed by 90% of the male population and 25% of the women in Yemen. 17% of family income is spent on khat. Especially on Thursday afternoons, men gather for a 6 to 8 hour chew, smoke, and chat session. I rank khat only a step below coca leaves or betel nut. There's way too much chewing for the caffeine-like boost. Meet Ahmed Swade. He's a khat dealer in the local souk. By the way, khat is also a valuable Scrabble word. It's Q-A-T, there's no U. We photographed Ahmed at dawn, and this is his day's worth of food and bag of khat. Also in Sana'a, dagger shop owner Bashir Saban in the same souk, and he's got a 2-bag-a-day habit. This is Sada, a mother of 3 young children. The mosque is not in Yemen or Iraq. This mosque isn't. It's one of a dozen of U.S. Army Mojave training village mosques. What's that all about? Well, I just wanted to tell my fellow citizens and taxpayers here that real Iraqis and hundreds of actors put troops about to deploy to Iraq through a series of training exercises 3 times a day. 28-year-old Kurdish newcomer completed 1 tour in Iraq and was training in the Mojave for a second. He's in Iraq right now. 30-year-old Felipe Adams, dropping out of college to join the army, and on his 2nd tour of Iraq was paralyzed by a sniper in Baghdad. He has no feeling below the waist, but is still racked by periodic bouts of phantom pain in his legs. He lives in Los Angeles with his parents in a house bought with VA assistance. Tan Nguyen Van is another victim of war. This is the American war, that's what they call it. He was drafted into the North Vietnamese People's Army in 1970 when he was 22, and then marched for 6 months through Cambodia with his unit to the south, where he was ultimately gravely wounded by US shelling. Back in Hanoi, the government helps him and other wounded veterans by subsidizing their 3-wheeled delivery vehicles. And while eating his breakfast bowl of pho in a tiny restaurant, he told us that he knew the US could never win the war because none of the captured US soldiers could say why they were fighting in his country. I'll share one last story with you. And basically, I put this in there because I just read earlier that the new statistics are out about young people in the United States spending 6 to 8 hours a day on media. Here's one story that I want to share with you to make you maybe not feel so bad about your own kids. This is extreme gamer Xu Jinping. He's 23. He lives in a chair at the Ming Wang Internet Cafe in Shanghai. He rarely gets up from his seat in front of the computer. He rents for 24 hours a day, and he's playing online interactive video internet games. Twice a day, though, he does get up, and he walks a few steps to his right, and he picks up the phone on the wall, looks at the menu, and he orders some food. And a few blocks away, a small restaurant prepares this food. They deliver to him within the next 10 minutes. And he sleeps in his chair, as I was saying, and showers once a week at a friend's. To check this, I got up very early in the morning to make sure that he was sleeping in his chair, and sure enough, 4:26 a.m. there on the clock. The other 6 months of the year, he's living at home with his parents and works freelance on computer 3D graphics games. Here's Joey Chestnut. He set a new world's record last year by eating 68 hot dogs at Coney Island in 10 minutes. This was his previous record, 66, Nathan's famous, 20,000 calories in one day. We're happy to report that Jill McTighe in East London, who has replaced her drug addiction with food addiction. And after the photo shoot, she completely changed her diet and her family. She told me this on the phone last month when I talked to her, and she said that she's replaced all the fatty junk food with fruits and vegetables, lost a lot of weight, but she still smokes. So on a lighter note, she weighs less than 100 pounds. We're going to close with a few images of Olympic proportions. At age 16, this is Kao Shai. She's already a seasoned veteran of her profession. She began her education as an acrobat at age 7, and today she's a principal acrobat with the Shanghai Circus World. So that's our book, and you know, I think Mike showed what you might have been thinking, or what a lot of people ask us is, what do we eat in a day? So this is it, and I want to invite everybody really to try this, though. You record your daily diet and record the food calories for a few weeks. There's lots of online sites, and when our book comes out in the fall, you can check our website. We'll make it really easy for you. It's so simple, anyone can do it. Well, maybe not creationists, but just about everybody else. Thank you very much. Bon appetit. Parahachabu and good health.